Good evening, everyone. Welcome along to this evening's webinar. We'll just give it another minute or so just for everyone
Um,
to join.
I can't, I'm going to have to be on nothing because I'm driving in a second. So I just have to listen in. Apologies.
That's no problem at all. Thanks for letting us know. And we will, yeah, so we'll give it another minute or so and then we will kick off just so that everyone has a chance to join. And yeah, hope you're looking forward to a great talk this evening. Okay, I think we'll make a start. It looks like that's everyone joining us this evening. So welcome everyone. Thank you very much for coming along to this evening's webinar. My name's John Hardy. I'm the network coordinator for the Community Tree Network Collaborative, and this is the latest in our series of webinars. The CTNC is a project in collaboration with the Fellowship of the Trees, Norfolk County Council, and it's partnered with six established community tree nurseries. But we're a peer-to-peer knowledge sharing organization for all community tree nurseries across the UK. And some of the things we do are these webinars. We have open space sessions every 2 months for members to come along and share info and chat about issues. And we also have in-person events. This evening's event is Roots of Engagement, Social Media Strategies for Community Tree Nurseries. And basically, we're looking at social media for CTNs. This is something that our members have highlighted as being an issue of importance, how to raise profile and how to engage more with volunteers and customers, and just the broader social media scape. Um, just to let you know, this webinar will be recorded, and once it's been edited, it will be added to our website and also to YouTube. So do please give it a watch there as well. I'm very pleased this evening to welcome along two speakers. First up, we have Kerry Watkins, the founder of Social for Good. That's a social media agency dedicated to helping purposeful businesses, entrepreneurs, and nonprofits amplify their positive messaging. We're very excited to hear from Kerry. And that will be followed by Misha Warnock of Forest Tree Cooperative, and that's in Yorkshire. And Misha will be speaking to us really from his personal experience of handling social media for a community tree nursery. So yeah, very excited for both these speakers. If you have any questions, we'll be doing a question and answer at the end after Misha has spoken. So please, any questions, add them into the chat box, and I'll take a note of them, and we'll get into the question and answers at the end. So yeah, without any further delay, thanks again for joining us, and I'll hand over to Kerry.
Thanks, John. Good evening, everybody. Really nice to be here to talk to you about social media. As John said, I run a social media agency. I've been working in social for about 15 years, and a lot of the work that we do is helping our clients to build social media strategies. So, what I'm going to talk to you about tonight is the steps involved to creating a strategy. So whether we're working with an entrepreneur or whether we're working with a global charity, for example, we're following the same steps. Obviously, each organization will have very different budgets, different ambitions, different target audiences. but the steps are still the same. So over the next 45 minutes, I'm going to talk you through these steps that we use to build social media strategies for our clients. And I hope that they're really helpful in you thinking about your own social media strategies. So I'm going to share a screen and talk you through this process. And we're going to stop maybe about halfway through to do a practical exercise where you get to think about your own content as well. So it won't just be me talking for 45 minutes straight. I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear. Okay, so there are 8 steps to developing a strategy, and I'll talk you through each one. The first one is actually nothing to do with social media initially. It's about stepping back from your organisation and thinking about how you align what really matters to you, what you're doing as an organisation, with what's happening on social. This comes before any other kind of steps in the strategy process, because what's really important, the why, the purpose, like why you exist as an organisation, is clear to other people on social. These are kind of umbrella things that will help everybody kind of relate to you and be able to engage with you. Your strengths, your kind of USPs, are what differentiates you from your competitors. It's really important that that's clear on social. And your values as an organisation. So what values you live, how those kind of guide your communication. All of these things we would be asking a client in the first instance to understand what they're really about, what's their heart and soul as an organisation, because we would then make sure that that's present in their social media bios or about sections, and that there's a kind of common thread of those strengths, values and purpose throughout their social content. And then the other steps involved in this process then go on to objectives here at the top. So we think about the goal of social, target audiences, who are the people that you're trying to reach and engage, which channels are going to be most appropriate to help you do that, what kind of content should you be sharing to add value to those audiences and to get your messaging across, how you manage those communities online. Social isn't just a one-way street. One of the massive opportunities with social media is that there's an opportunity for two-way engagement, for speaking to your target audiences and listening to them. So it's not just about broadcasting content, even though that's a really big step, but how you communicate with them and how you manage the interactions that you get. So that's the next step. And then we need to think about resources. So often when we've been through this process of establishing goals, target audiences and so on, there's so much that you can do on social, but it doesn't mean that you should do all of it, because a lot of the people we work with in charities and purpose-driven businesses don't have a great deal of time. So we need to think about what resources you have at your disposal. How big is your team? How many hours do you have a week? What software or tools could help you to make sure that any strategy you come up with is actually going to be actionable. And then the final step is reporting or measurement, and actually thinking about, is this working? Are we achieving our goals? And the reason that this is a cyclical process and not a linear one is because social media is always changing, and you need to be trying new things, and some things will work and some things won't work. So if you get to this final step and you're measuring what's working well on social, you might be achieving some of your objectives, but not others. And you could then just look at each step in this process and think about, okay, what do I maybe need to tweak? You don't need to rip it all up and start again. Hopefully this will become clearer as I talk through each step in a bit more detail. But going back to this first step of actually stepping back from social and looking at your organisation, I would invite you to, if you want to develop a social media strategy or tweak yours after today, think about your why. How would you articulate what your purpose and vision is as an organisation? With the people that work in that organisation, why do you all do what you do? Why do you get out of bed in the morning and go to work? And what impact does your organisation hope to have in the world? And then thinking about your strengths, what are you particularly good at? Do you have a reputation for something great? Do you do something better or different to other similar organisations? And the core values of your organisation. So if you were to write all of these down, what I would then say is have a look at your social content for the past 3 months, perhaps, and think really objectively, are all of these things clear? Would we understand these things about the organisation from looking at your social channels and content. And it sounds like quite a simple thing, but actually if you've been working in, or some of our clients have been working in their charity for kind of 5-6 years in a comms role, and they know all of these things so well, but actually new people that come to follow you on social might not be aware of these things. And so it's important to remind yourself that we do need to get these things across, because this is what will help connect people to us on social and kind of stand outside of the crowd. So then the next step is thinking about what your objectives are. So it's very difficult to measure anything unless you have an objective to measure it against. So we need to think about what success looks like for you, and that will be different, I'm sure, for all of you in the room. And consider the journey from people discovering your brand initially on social to becoming a supporter or advocate. And one thing I'm going to be quiet in a minute and just give you a moment to reflect, is to think about what success looks like for you on social. And I'll just give you a couple of examples from conversations I've had with clients at Social for Good. So we worked with one kind of big eco brand that was it was a big brand, and they did lots of cleaning products, and they had a very kind of green reputation. And for the head of digital, success to them looked like David Attenborough retweeting a post of theirs. That was all that meant success to them. Whereas the social media manager wanted to see a 1% increase in the engagement rate on Instagram. So two very, very different definitions of success. So it doesn't matter whether it's really detailed and it's metric based, or it's kind of really broad or just a feeling. But I'll just be quiet for a few seconds and just let you have a think about what success on social media looks like for you. And it's also a good excuse to drink some tea while it's still hot. Okay. So once we've got a picture of success, we then really need to get more granular and think, what are our specific objectives? And we use these 5 categories to think about objectives, because there are many different stages along a journey of somebody hearing about you for the first time to becoming that supporter. So we set objectives within awareness and interest as the first category. That's really kind of light touch or top of the sales funnel. I hate the word funnel. I don't think it's quite as relevant in the digital space where there are many different touch points, but it's that first kind of interaction with you. We're not expecting anything from them, but they're just aware of us. Then we think about engagement. So this is about some kind of interaction with your brand on social media. It could be a video view or a like or a share, but they've interacted in some way, and that tells us that one, that content is interesting to them and has resonated with them, but it also means that they're coming further along that journey, and that they're a bit more, they'll remember us a bit more as a brand, they're a bit more interested. The next category we call meaningful action, and that's about them taking a step that is normally trackable digitally, and it means they're doing something that's really valuable to us as a business or an organisation. And I'll talk through some examples of these in a moment. The next category is advocacy. So this is where somebody has become a fan, or they're supporting us and sharing our content and doing a bit of our marketing for us. And then this next category, even though it doesn't really sit perfectly well on the end, and I think it umbrellas all of these, it's about reputation. Now, this is a bit of a fluffy category. I'm sure some peers of mine think it shouldn't be an objective because it's not very easily measurable by data. But I've worked with a lot of charities that sometimes feel that their positioning in the social landscape or their reputation as a charity isn't really accurate. One charity I worked with many years ago had a reputation for being a little bit kind of old school, not very progressive, quite archaic in its policies. And actually, it was a really progressive charity doing incredible things in the community. So for them, it was really important that we had an objective around changing people's perception of what they were doing by sharing those things. So it might be important to you, but it might not. Okay, so I'm going to talk through these 5 categories with a few different examples. These are not kind of an exhaustive list of objectives, but maybe some will resonate with you. So, please do feel free to take notes. Or I'd also be happy to share some of these slides afterwards if that would be useful. So just as I talk through them, please think about which objectives are a priority for you. So first of all, we talked about awareness and interest. So you might want to consider objectives such as just generating awareness of who you are and what you do. And that can be measured by your content output, by impressions on posts or video views, for example. You might have an objective about growing followers on a specific channel, because as your follower count grows, you know that more and more people are hearing about you. You might want to be reaching a new audience. You might have a different market that you're trying to attract, or you feel you haven't kind of reached enough of the local market that you want to. And you can look at some demographics on some social channels as well to help you kind of measure whether you're achieving that or not. Some clients we work with, it's really important to them to be sharing important messages about their work. So that might be an objective. And also it's good evidence of interest if people are visiting your website from social media, and we can track that through Google Analytics. So those are just some examples of awareness and interest objectives. In terms of engagement, you might just generally want to engage your audience more. If you're finding that you're not getting great post engagement, you might need to rethink content strategy to get that engagement rate up. So that's very easy to measure through social by looking at post reactions, comments, videos, views, etc. It might be something that you want to focus on about building relationships with a certain audience group, volunteers or customers, for example. So you can look at specific interactions to track that. Perhaps you want to spark conversations around your content, or increase views of website content, so people actually spending more time on site or looking at multiple pages on a website. Or perhaps you really want to engage with certain stakeholders. It could be employees or partners or beneficiaries. And in terms of meaningful action, so these things that we can track that show kind of a deeper level, it's like a deeper interaction than a post like or a comment. So it could be somebody signing up to a newsletter list, perhaps. It could be somebody volunteering with you or fundraising, or maybe it's around recruitment, people donating if that's something that you do, or people download something or take some other kind of action on a website. So Google Analytics can, with that platform, you can track all of these things from social media traffic. And then advocacy. So people sharing your content might be something that you really want to strive for. Or certain people, whether it's influential voices or partners or others in your community, sharing your work or commenting on your posts. And perhaps you want people to tag you in content. That's also a great way to raise awareness, because if somebody tags you in a post, then their followers are likely to see that as well. And finally, with reputation, you might, as I said, it's a bit fluffy and it's not 100% measurable, but you might just want to have an objective that social supports your reputation as something. It could be an expert in your field or a certain type of organisation, or perhaps building something around brand image. These are things that can only really be measured by having a kind of qualitative review, or bringing somebody in to do a bit of an audit, or even asking family and friends, if you have a very small account, how do you think we're doing with this? So as I said, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are just some examples to get you thinking about different objectives in these different categories. You don't have to have objectives in every category, but this is for you to kind of take from what you need to in order to achieve success for you on social. Okay, so the third step is about audiences. You may have heard of buyer personas or customer personas online. If you Google that, there's lots of templates you can use. But the whole point of audience personas is to have a really clear picture of who it is that you're trying to speak to on social. You know your target audiences better than anyone else. So it's a really useful activity to build up some kind of persona. This is just a template that we use at Social for Good. Again, I'm happy to share it if you think it would be useful, but there's many available online. Some of the key things to think about when we want to develop audience personas are what their interests are, because this will help you create social content that resonates with them. How they engage with you, what resources do you have that they might use, or if you put on events, would they attend your events? And think about how they actually engage with your organisation. And this one, I'd say, is one of the most important elements. So thinking about their pain points. So if you think about obstacles or challenges or anxieties, is there anything that kind of defines them that you can help with? So for example, with our agency, one of our target audiences is a social media manager for a charity. And so we've developed a persona called Sophie that was actually based on a real social media manager we worked with. And Sophie's pain points were they didn't have enough time to manage social. They were juggling lots of different things digitally at the same time. And they hadn't studied social at university, because many people don't. So they felt they had kind of a broad knowledge, but not any specific niche social knowledge. So because we understood Sophie's pain points and challenges, we're able to develop content and messaging that resonated. So it might be sharing a guide on the latest social changes in 2024, or perhaps we'd start a caption with, "We understand that you're juggling lots of things at once, but blah, blah, blah." And just the way that you use language in your captions can be just tweaked slightly to imagine you're talking to this actual person, this persona that you've created, will really help you get that cut through. One of the biggest mistakes I see people making on social, and it's a very easy thing to slip into, is trying to talk to everybody. And if our language is that if we were kind of speaking to a big group of people, we might struggle to engage people. Whereas if you create a persona that represents your target audience, and you write your captions on social as if you're speaking directly to them, you will start to grow more engagement, because it will get their attention in their social feeds. And obviously we need to think about which social channels they're on, which I'll come to next. So the channels that are relevant for you will be where your audiences are spending their time. But it also needs to be the channels that you feel comfortable using, especially if you're a small organisation. The latest research shows that younger people, so Gen Z, kind of 16 to 26, are mainly using Instagram, but they are still, and they're on YouTube a lot as well. Facebook is here, but it's really more about Facebook Messenger or Marketplace. They're not really active on Facebook as we know it. And TikTok and Snapchat are very popular channels as well. When you get to 27 plus, Facebook is the dominant platform, but also you can see that YouTube and Instagram are very popular networks as well. And interestingly, what we're seeing this year, which we weren't a few years ago, is that TikTok is there at number 4 for millennials, Gen X and baby boomers. And then the fastest growing platforms, I thought it'd be useful to share this with you as well, because social media is always changing. And I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, Facebook was huge and other channels weren't particularly popular. But now, there's lots of news articles now about the demise of Facebook and people leaving X, and Instagram and TikTok are becoming much more popular. But we're seeing really high growth in Gen Z using Pinterest. I'm not saying that everyone has to jump on these networks, but just to understand what's going on in the social landscape. And more millennials are using LinkedIn now. And we are also seeing a growth on LinkedIn with younger audiences as well as they come to graduate. And the biggest shocker to some perhaps is that with Gen X and baby boomers, so anyone age 41 plus, TikTok has the biggest growth. So in a few years' time, TikTok will be the new Facebook, and that's where everybody will be engaging. So we're seeing more and more organisations now invest in TikTok, get used to it if they've got the resources to do so, because there will be a tipping point at some point where it's really useful for them to be. And then we look at content. So this is a really big step. So one of the first things that I always like to talk about is what makes great social media content. I think it's really important to put ourselves in our target audience's shoes. So when you've thought about those audience personas and who you're really trying to talk to on social, think about them and they're scrolling through their feeds. How are you going to get their attention? And I think there's 4 things that make great social content. The first is that it's eye-catching in the first place. Unfortunately, there's a lot of competition on social. Some platforms such as Facebook are very saturated, and we have short attention spans these days. So people are scrolling through feeds at a rate of knots, and anything eye-catching is going to help to get their attention. So video or a GIF, any kind of moving image is going to be really powerful at doing that. I think basically the more video you can do, the better your social will perform. And that sometimes scares a few people, but it's worth starting to incorporate more video in your strategy if you haven't already. And you should see that you get a lot more reach and engagement. But even just great photography, a strong visual, or even the first line of the caption can be really attention grabbing. And it always sounds a bit frivolous to talk about emojis, but there's actually a lot of research that shows the huge increase in engagement you get from using emojis in captions. Obviously, you don't want to go overboard, but 1 or 2 emojis at the beginning of a caption can really help get somebody's attention on social. It's a bit of a quick win. The next thing is that it needs to be relatable. And this again is where audience personas become really important, because they need to feel that the content they're seeing really speaks to them. So the language is relevant, the topic is interesting and engaging to them. For example, if we wanted to reach new social media managers that haven't got any experience, we wouldn't be using loads of jargon because it would just confuse them. So we'd simplify our language. So that's just one example of how you might adjust your language as if you were speaking to your target audience in real life. Content, or great content, has to have clear value. I'm really not a believer of just putting anything out on social to maintain a publishing frequency. I really believe it needs to be quality over quantity, and it needs to add some value to your audience. And that means making them think or feel something. So it might be entertaining, inspiring, educational, informative, supportive, or in some way it's building a relationship between the author and the viewer. Now, I don't think any of us want to put stuff out on social that's just going to be scrolled past. So let's just think about what value it has to them. And then again, your content will start to perform better if you tick that box. And ideally, the content is engaging as well, as in it encourages interaction or provides a human connection or evokes an emotion. So people started using social media 15 plus years ago because they wanted to connect with other people. And we're still seeing that social platforms are struggling to kind of maintain that balance between showing ads and showing content that helps people connect with people. If they just showed ads, they would lose user numbers hand over fist. And any content that has real people in it or kind of helps people feel like they're getting to know you and connect with you as an organization tends to get more engagement. And in terms of like directly encouraging interaction, if you ask a question with your content, you're encouraging comments and you could get some conversations going. And then the algorithms will pick that up. So the more engagement that something gets, the more people will see that particular piece of content. So these 4 things I think are fundamental in how we think about content strategy. And a quote that I unfortunately can't remember who said it originally because I've been repeating it for years, but I think great content is anything that adds value to our audience's experience on social. And this is really key, talking with them, not at them. And what we're seeing in the social landscape now is with the rise of AI and misinformation, that trust and community are becoming even more important. So I think talking with audiences rather than broadcasting content at them remains as important as it always has. Now I'm going to talk through a framework called the 360 Content Framework. And it's a framework I came up with a few years ago when I was working with a client, and they were really struggling for content ideas, for finding interesting things to post, and kind of finding stories in the organisation. And I always believe there are more stories within an organisation to share on social than people realise. And so I kind of invited them to imagine that they're sat on a swivel chair that you would have in an office in the middle of this organization and looking at every different element to see what stories they could find that would make great social content. So I'm going to talk through this framework, and then we're going to pop you into breakout rooms so that you can just have a little ideation session and discuss some ideas, and see if anything comes up for you that you might want to do on social after tonight. So the first quadrant is behind the scenes. And this is where you might think of content ideas about you as an organisation, your opinions, your ideas, what inspires the people in the organisation to do your work. It could be personal and professional journeys of employees, any meetings or media activities that occur, any events or networking or conferences that happen in your sector, and more light-hearted content such as team culture and real life. As I was just saying before, like, people really want to get to know the real people in an organisation, and balancing a little bit of behind the scenes where people can really feel like they get to know you and get a sense of what's going on will really help people to connect with your organisation. And then we have what you do, which most people are quite good at doing this bit on social. It's your brand story, your values, why you do what you do, what your niche is, or what makes your work particularly interesting or different. It's often our kind of products and services that we sell, what we do and how we do it. But one thing that sometimes I see less frequently is people talking about the impact that they have, or the impact that they hope to have through their work on people, on families, teams, communities, the planet, whatever it might be. This is something, because we work with purpose-driven organisations, is really key to pull out. And people care about the impact if they support a business with purpose. Then we have your audience. So I've talked about audience personas, and the more that you can flesh out these kind of avatars of your target audience, understanding their pain points and challenges means that you can develop content to address those, tapping into their goals and motivations. Maybe you can do Q&As with people who are, I don't know, customers or people in your target audience that would kind of add some value to your audience in that way. I don't know if you have case studies or reviews or testimonials, but these can be useful to gather. And thinking about what benefits people get from your organisation. Is it an emotional benefit, a practical one, a financial one? So really tapping it is really putting yourself in their shoes here, rather than the first two quadrants, to think about what they want to see from you and what would be useful. And then the final quadrant is kind of stepping back and taking a wider view. So what's the news, or what are the updates in your particular sector or what you're interested in? Are there any data, statistics or trends that you could share? Are there any community issues or debates happening globally around your work? Perhaps you have an idea about the future of what the future looks like in your area of expertise, or just what's going on in your local area. So this is not about your business as such, but it's more about thinking about the bigger picture and the wider view. So we're going to share this slide in the chat before you go into breakout rooms. But what I'd love you to do for, I think we'll say 10 minutes, is think about, are there any ideas from me talking through those that you might want to share from each of those quadrants, and thinking about those four things that make great content: eye-catching, relatable, clear value, and inviting engagement. And then we'll come back and I'll just run through the last 3 steps. Are we okay to do breakout rooms?
Yeah, let's start them now. Would you like 3 people in each room, roughly?
Yeah, let's do that.
Cool.
Should be good chats.
Right, see everybody, go into the groups now.
found that I didn't have the time, so I ended up hiring someone to do it. And the idea was they would come up to the tree nursery. We have a weekly thing every Friday where we work with lots of volunteers, or we were hoping to get lots of volunteers up there and grow trees together. And the idea was that this person who was going to do our social media was also going to do stuff on our website, updates, and come and join us and be present and kind of get a feel of what we were doing and share this and just get more engagement. Unfortunately, this didn't really work out, and I found that I was actually relaying information over WhatsApp and various other media to share what we were doing, taking pictures and all of that without necessarily being interactive on the forefront of social media. So I was only getting little insights of how it was engaging or how people were responding with it. And I found it counterproductive and very costly as well, because I was paying an hourly rate for something that I was effectively doing most of the work. I was taking the picture, putting the content, or describing what we've been doing, or what we were planning to do, or any of these sort of things. So in the end, I've ended up going back to doing it myself again. In the meantime, it's been a long journey of sort of understanding how it all works. It's quite a funny little beast. They've all got different aspects to it. Facebook is probably the main source of volunteers. We get most people coming from there. They're the most engaging in terms of relating to us, to people, I guess, with their emojis and all the rest of it. You can see there's a bit more than just a thumbs up, that you can see the people that love your content or resonate with what you're saying, and it's quite easy to sort of get an idea of how people are engaging with it. And that was a big part for us, was to get people out there. It was not only to send our message out, but was really to get people involved. And I found that Facebook does work really well, but there is a fine line between getting lots of engagement, not having the time to engage with it, responding to messages or questions and all of that sort of stuff. You kind of learn over time that you're really finding what works for you, and that you have to adapt constantly. Like Carrie was saying, it is constantly reviewing what's working and what's not, and what you're actually really trying to get out of it. Sharing negative press or news about what's happening and what you're doing or in your sector doesn't necessarily bode very well. People generally like happy news and good things and go lucky, feel happy, click and away you go. So I found that I've been adapting, and I sort of steer away from giving negative news, and I try to just stick on a very positive note with everything we do. That's also kind of what we had with the social media. It was about getting social anxieties out. It was about climate anxiety. It's addressing all of this to show that there is stuff going on, because sometimes, at least for me personally, it feels like it's all quite daunting, and it's all a bit depressing, really, with what's going on in the state of affairs in the world and everything. So it felt like it was a good way to engage people and make them realize that there's lots of positive things going out there, and there are ways to have your own meaningful impact, and you can take part. But it might take quite a while for someone to actually come out and do that. They might just have you in the background for a very, very long time. And you will get this when they do eventually come out. They say, I've been meaning to come out for years, but I'm really busy. Everyone's got lives. There's the cost of living. There's all of that going on in the background. It took me years to volunteer with the previous organization to finally get out there and end up doing what I'm doing. So just bear in mind that it might not look like it's working, but it is working in the background. And lots of people don't necessarily like pressing buttons and liking. They just watch it and they just look at it without actually engaging with it, which is another thing that you just need to reassure yourself, that it's not that people don't like your content. They just don't all click, and that's different audiences. Some are quite shy with it. So we don't just use Facebook. We also use Instagram, again, thinking we would tap into a younger audience. But like Carrie said, it's about moving images. It's about striking images. It's about video. If you can spend the time making a nice video, you'll probably get a lot of people interacting with it, and you'll generally, there's a lot more stats on those. There's a lot more going on. You can see there's a lot more interaction. They like a little video. However, I don't have the time to do it, and I find it really frustrating. I would love to just have the time to do it, but I'm very, very busy with everything going on. I wear many hats in what I do. So it's one of those that we're probably missing a bit of a target. But whether we're actually getting people coming out from Instagram or not, hard to say. Because I think we've only one volunteer so far that I've actually known came from Instagram. Everyone else has been from Facebook so far. We've also done Twitter, or X as it is called now. Another beast entirely, 280 characters. So whatever you thought you could copy and paste within Facebook and Meta and all of that and just share does not work. Suddenly you have to rejiggle everything and fit it within 280 characters, and you feel like you're doing something entirely different. And again, it's a whole different audience. People like to share it, but we're not. I don't think I've had any actual volunteers from there, from that perspective. It also feels quite negative. There's a lot of just people being quite negative on it. I think lots of people are shifting away from it, and I'm strongly debating doing the same thing. So I don't really like what I'm seeing when I go on the platform myself. There's very few positive things to keep me chirpy and happy. So it's probably not worth the time and effort to do it. So instant Facebook worked quite well that they share it, but again, sharing doesn't just necessarily solve your problems, because if you're tagging people into it, they have different names, so it doesn't necessarily, or the handles might be different, so it might not transfer in the way that you would like. And when you try and edit it afterwards, it decides that a few people have liked it, you're now editing it. It's going to shut down the whole thing because you might be changing the content of what people have actually liked. So avoid editing if possible. Just from, I've seen it literally look like it's just suddenly dies down. And there's funny things about timing. If you post at a random time, it's say 2 o'clock in the afternoon, because that's when you've got time, chances are you don't get a lot of engagement. But if you whack it on about lunchtime, 12, 10, sometimes you're lucky, but usually about 12 and 5 o'clock seem to be the prime in the UK, where I get lots of engagement. And if you get lots of engagement right away, it keeps you going. Otherwise, it tends to shut you down quite early. While Twitch is a sort of 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock game, it turns out, because otherwise I don't get any engagement on that one. So yeah, it's a bit of a funny thing. You've got to keep reviewing, and it's really about just constantly sharing your processes and what you're doing. And really, like Harry said, it's about what you're trying to get out there. So for us, it's really clear on what we want, and that's people coming out. It'd be great to get donations. That's another more challenging one, I think. People need to really relate with you on that one. But yeah, it's I think you just have to try the different, whatever works for you, and just keep tweaking it and keep reviewing, because it's quite tricky. I think especially when it's very real time and it's very same all the time, which I guess with what we do could be quite similar in its content. It can be quite hard to get new audiences, hashtags, and all of these things can bring new people. But yeah, you end up in quite a small little hole, I suppose, in terms of how many people are engaging with it. So I've still got plenty to learn. I'll be taking plenty back from what Gary said, but hopefully I can improve it a little bit. But yeah, I don't really have masses of time to dedicate towards it, because it's really just an extra add-on to everything else that we do. I think, unless anyone's got any questions, I'll probably wrap it up there, because I just feel like I'm going around in circles now. My first talk on social media, by the way. This is certainly out. This is like very unusual for me. Does anyone have any questions? No?
Well, thank you very much, Misha. That was fantastic. Really, really helpful and insightful. If anyone has any questions for Misha or for Kerry, do please pop them into the chat box. And thanks as well to Kerry for a fantastic presentation. I think the two speakers, pardon me, really complemented each other in terms of it's about understanding who your audience are, what you want to try and achieve. Playing the long game has been mentioned, and yeah, I think learning as you go along, very much so it seems. And as well, I like the approach of keeping it happy and keeping the content positive. That's a really nice approach. I have a couple of questions just I noted down as we were going along. Um, Kerry, you had mentioned a couple of times Google Analytics. Could you maybe tell us a bit more about what that is, how it works, and how people would use it?
Sure. I realise now that I think they've actually changed the name of it to Universal Analytics, perhaps. So I might be a bit outdated, but whatever it's now called, it's a free platform and it just involves putting some code onto your website, just in the back end of your website. Um, I'll perhaps try and find a link before this call's over and pop it in the chat because I mean, I managed to do it and I'm not a web developer, so it's not that complicated. Once this code is on your website, it tracks people visiting your site and it gives you some really useful analytics. So it will tell you how many visitors you get each month or whatever time period you want to look at. It will tell you how long they spent on site on average, how many pages they looked at, and then you can get more advanced and set up what I think they're called events. And that would be people like downloading something or taking some kind of action on your website or filling in a form. That's a little bit more advanced, but the basic Google Analytics info is useful, even just to see what they're looking at on your website. The homepage is normally the most viewed one, obviously, and then it's normally about before people start looking at your services. But if you do blogs, for example, that's really useful to see what blog content's popular, or if you have any frequently asked questions on your website, and Google Analytics tells you what people are looking at, you can then create useful social content to address that. So I'll see if I can find a link about setting it up, John, before we finish up.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it seems like it's a very useful tool. Um, Misha, would you mind just sort of telling us how much time on average you would kind of spend in a week on social media, just so we get an idea of kind of where you're sitting at?
Yeah, probably about an hour in terms of putting content and things, especially as such cross-platforming that takes quite a long time. But it gets quite quick if you know what you want to say and you've just got a few photos. It's probably that as well, processing and going through your pics as you're taking throughout the day. That you might just want to sort of hone it down to a few good pics rather than lots of rubbish pics, because you'll just get better engagement with it, getting nice clear things. Again, like Harry said, seeing people, a little bit of what they're like, or actual pictures of people rather than just trees all the time with different things will get people more engaged with it. Again, I try not to do too many questions. Sometimes I'll do it just to get engagement. I'll ask a question, what tool is this, or does anyone know this? Or, just to kind of check, I guess, how many people are out there and still listening and getting our content. But then I find that the smaller things I can interact with, but once it goes into sort of heavier or larger, more involved things, I find I don't necessarily have the time to respond to it all, and I don't want to ignore people or not get back to people. So I feel like there's a real balance with that. I try not to put too much question asking material, rather putting content out. And occasionally I do engage with other other things going on in order to sort of stay in the loop. Like Gary was saying again, I keep referring back to you, to actually feed back. So you're not just advertising, so to say, but you're actually then putting your name out there. And I suppose for that, Twitter was quite good just to make a comment or get involved with something and getting our brand out there. So to say, it doesn't feel like a brand. It feels very much a down to earth thing that we're doing, but at least getting our names out there and then getting ourselves mentioned repeatedly is quite helpful, I guess, for people maybe buying trees from us in the future or thinking about us in terms of offering us work in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, so that seems very manageable in terms of, it's obviously still quite a bit of work, but it's obviously something you can fit in around your other uh, responsibilities. Um, Kerry, there's a question about what are your thoughts on using hashtags?
Yeah, I was just replying to that and thought I'm going to end up saying it in a minute. So, yeah, hashtags are becoming less important these days because algorithms have become more sophisticated, and algorithms on social feeds will show people what they think they're most interested in, which really means what they think will keep them staying on that platform for longer. So we're seeing less impact from using hashtags to get increased visibility. That's not to say I would suggest kind of scrapping them completely. We're kind of still using on Instagram like 3 or 4 just to kind of add some context. And if they're to do with a location or a kind of a wider campaign, then it's worth using them. I did read recently on LinkedIn that LinkedIn themselves are saying that hashtags are becoming less important unless it's to do with a larger campaign. So I would say I wouldn't spend too much time worrying about hashtags because they are getting less important, but obviously they're still clickable on Instagram. So if somebody is using hashtag, I don't know, Brighton, for example, other people from Brighton might be clicking on that to see what's happening locally, and that can help you with your proactive comms to join local conversations. So sometimes there's a benefit, but yeah, that was a long way in a nutshell, becoming less important. Don't worry so much.
Oh, okay. And well, actually, Gina said that she thinks Instagram's getting rid of hashtags in December. I don't know if you're aware of that or.
No, I don't. I mean, I'm not aware of it. I'm not saying that they won't. It might well be the case. I think they're, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if they do, Jane. But
Sounds like they're kind of on the way out anyway.
so.
Um, okay, if anyone else has any questions, please pop them in the chat for Kerry or Misha. And we have quite a few minutes left if we need them. Um, and if not, then I think we can call it a night. I think this has been a really, really interesting and helpful and insightful webinar. Thanks again very, very much to both Kerry and Misha for your perspectives and your insights there. And yeah, as I said before, this has been recorded, so it will be available on YouTube and on our website for people. And Kerry, if you don't mind, maybe share some of the slides that you've put together this evening. I'm sure people will be really into hearing about that, to getting to see them. And yeah, best of luck, everyone, with your social media journeys. I hope it all goes really, really well, and you're able to achieve what you want to with socials. Um, and just a quick plug for our next open space session is on the 10th of December. So that's open to all community tree nurseries and anyone interested to come along, ask questions, share knowledge, and just talk about the issues that are important. So yeah, just once more, thank you very, very much to both our speakers. Thanks to everyone for coming along this evening to join us, and I'll see you again in the future. Good night.
Bye.
Good night.